Good afternoon. Welcome into Oven Known Word show number 15. This time I have the privilege of having a very notable guest on the show today. It is my privilege to welcome Congresswoman Goodlander from New Hampshire's 2nd Congressional District to our humble little setup here in Hudson.
This is an amazing place.
Oh, for sure. And today, we pivot today's show from talking about autism and the discussion on the state level, which we have spent quality time on, more to the national angle and an overview of disability rights and autism. For full disclosure, the idea for today's show actually came out of a policy meeting that I had the privilege of joining the Congresswoman for in April of this year in Concord alongside Chase Eagleson of the New Hampshire Council on Developmental Disabilities, who's their policy director, Shauna Hallberg, a fellow disability advocate from the Seacoast, and of course Dr. Louis Espeto, of Executive Director of ABLE New Hampshire, who I have had on the show on 2 separate occasions. So, with all the opening housekeeping out of the way, what role does the US Congress have in the autism discussion in regard to data privacy and the overall disability rights?
Well, first, Ian, thank you for having me on the show. I've been looking forward to this since you first told me about the show, and I think, as you said a moment ago, you were in single digits on the number of episodes, so I'm really honored to be part of this conversation with you. And when I think about the role that Congress plays, it's 3 really big lines of effort. And I keep my Constitution with me everywhere I go because
of course.
in my work these days, it's very useful. And it really, at the end of the day, Article 1 is a job description. It tells us what Congress's responsibilities are. It also tells us what the rights of the American people are. And when I think about the 3 core pieces of our job description, number 1 is that we write the laws, the civil rights laws, the education laws, that really go to the heart of vindicating the promise of our Constitution, of a government of, by, and for the people that respects the rights of everybody. And when I think about what the work Congress has done, especially in the last half century, in the last 50 years, from 1973 and the Rehabilitation Act, Section 504, being the starting point where we said for the first time as a federal government, anybody who receives federal funding cannot discriminate against people with disabilities. Otherwise, we shut down those funding streams. And that's an important tool. That's a through line in how we have enforced these basic protections, which to me are fundamental protections that trace their roots right back to the Declaration of Independence and to the core idea of self-government. So from the Rehabilitation Act to the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990, and we just marked the anniversary this past Sunday.
Yes, as a matter of fact.
It was Senator Bob Dole, who served our country in the Second World War, who came home with disabilities that changed the way that he thought about the law. And he was it's always been a bipartisan effort to make our laws more perfect. So, I think too, the ADA really being the core of it, but we'll come, I'm sure, to the Olmstead decision.
I was just getting ready to say some of these laws that you've brought up. Just in our opening question, we'll touch upon it a little bit further here, further down the list. certainly. And most recently, the Olmstead decision from 1999 and the June 18th Department of Justice memo stating that the community integration provisions of both Olmstead and Section 504 being optional, and certainly we can get into that a little bit later on. And certainly I'd like to hear your takeaways on that. Okay, so I know this was a big thing certainly last year in regard to Secretary Kennedy's autism registry. How do we maintain data privacy for the autistic and disabled community in the face of both AI and in the face of an administration who is very apparently historically illiterate? Again, the example I gave was the autism registry last spring, certainly.
And the analogies are the darkest episodes in human history. This was a tool that the Nazi regime used in the Holocaust. And
for sure.
It's, this has given rise to, this has concerned everybody who thinks about the basic right to privacy in the Fourth Amendment, and equally important, the 14th Amendment and equal protection.
Oh, definitely.
So, alongside writing the laws and appropriating money, Congress exercises oversight, and this is really important to the basic accountability of how any government works. And when it comes to this registry, this is an idea that was thrown out. The word itself was not used directly, but the whole infrastructure, has been commandeered. And one thing I can tell you for sure is Congress appropriates, we have the power of the purse, we appropriate money.
Definitely, yeah.
And we will make it crystal clear that not a dollar, not a cent, not a penny of taxpayer dollars should go towards creating this kind of registry, which to me upends the most basic ideas that make us who we are as Americans. We are a people who believe in privacy and who believe in equal protection under the law. And the idea that the government would commandeer your own personal medical records and create this kind of registry, it is, we've seen this in history, and these are the darkest moments in history.
Oh, for sure.
And so we will make sure that not a dollar can be put towards this. Now, the Government Accountability Office is one of my most important partners in government, and they have been closely following this because part of what happened here, the idea of a registry came from a database and a system that existed to help advance Alzheimer's research. And this basic infrastructure is what the Secretary of Health and Human Services had been eyeing to use. Already, the Government Accountability Office had said that this was wrought with really big transparency problems, accountability problems. They had already raised the alarm on this way back in 2024, which actually was not that long ago, but seems like a lifetime ago. It feels like a long
time ago, yeah.
April seems like a lifetime ago.
And to that end, and on quick fourth wall break, that was one of our first discussions at an event in Manchester, was in regard to the autism registry from last spring.
Right. Well, what I can tell you is we will be laser focused on this, because this is, the arguments for it are really not there.
Oh yeah,
and
definitely.
The arguments against it are very serious and go to some of the most core concerns that a citizen could ever raise about their government.
Very definitely, and for those keeping track at home, Alejandro and I talked about this a little bit in brief in our very first show last fall. Then in January, myself, State Representative Voss from Manchester, and Dr. Louis Espeto, who we touched on at the top, talked about this also. And that's been a core message that I've been trying to raise throughout the show, and keeping it on the forefront of people's minds.
Yes.
And keeping it on the forefront that as much as they're trying to insist it's necessary, and by that I mean federal DHHS and Secretary Kennedy, historically it's dangerous.
It is dangerous.
Historically it's a slippery slope. And based on what we've seen in the last year and a half, I have no doubt that they would misuse any said registry.
And to the extent that the argument is about research and about improving interventions, improving diagnoses, improving healthcare, this is all happening in the context where we've seen the biggest cuts to Medicaid and healthcare in American history, and the biggest and most senseless cuts to research in American history.
Definitely.
But what I'd say is, there has always been and there will continue to be strong bipartisan support for the research that we all want to see carried out. America has led the world in autism research, and that requires investments, and those investments are ones that have always had bipartisan support. A registry is not necessary to any of this.
Certainly not.
And it introduces dangers that should shock the conscience of every American.
Oh, very definitely. And for those who are interested in the more in-depth context of what I've had to say on this, I would direct them to shows 8 and 9 from April, where I both addressed the speeches that I gave at events in Concord last year, and then briefly touched upon some of the discussion from over the winter as well. Now, that being said, we now get into more of the policy-specific side of the discussion. And a little bit of context for a moment here. Our state legislature here in New Hampshire attempted to enshrine fundamental protection from Section 504 into state law this last session in House Bill 1593. Unfortunately, the House Republicans refused to act upon it before crossover day in March, so it didn't get as far as it could have, but it ties into our next question in how do we maintain disability rights in an era of an administration that has no respect for the existing laws such as ADA and Section 504 of the, and I'm going to get it wrong here, but
the Rehabilitation Act, yeah.
Thank you. How do we maintain all of that on a federal level? Or is it going to be a case where the states are going to have to do it themselves, and we're already seeing cracks beginning to show state by state in terms of recognizing that those are the law of the land still? Right.
Well, the first thing I'd say is one of the reasons I'm so grateful to you, Ian, for having the show. There's a nationwide campaign, Nothing About Us Without Us.
Okay.
That people in the autism community and disability advocates across the board are the most important voices, I believe, in this fight right now. We need to hear your voices because you know better than anyone what this means, what these protections mean, and what they've meant for your life.
Sure.
And we've both grown up in a country where in the last 50 years we've made the laws more perfect. New Hampshire in many ways has led the way. In 1991, when we were the first state in the nation to shut down the Laconia State School and to end one of the darkest chapters in our state's history. But the first thing I'd say is your voice and advocacy and stories really matter because we still have a whole lot of educating to do and still have so many barriers to remove. What I'd say is it is going to take localities and states and people of good faith at every level of government. I've always believed governing is a team sport. But when you have a major player, and in the case of enforcing our civil rights laws, the Department of Justice, the U.S. Department of Justice, has always been on the forefront of that effort. It was a department that was really created to enforce the 14th and 15th Amendments to our Constitution. The equal protection promise of the 14th Amendment. And I served for years in that department. It was one of the most extraordinary places because what you had then was a group of nonpartisan, patriotic public servants who woke up every day and tried to make America a more perfect union. And in 2014, we saw a federal civil rights consent decree here in New Hampshire that made our laws and made our state a better place. And that was 2014. And the Department of Justice today is really a shadow of its former self. And to me, one of the most heartbreaking expressions of that is this lengthy opinion, which I brought with me because although it's boring.
We're just about to get into the discussion a little bit here. And just a quick side note, and I mentioned House Bill 1593 from the past state legislative session. House Bill 1316 is another one that certainly bared watching and continues to bear watching because that was modeled from what Governor Pritzker of Illinois did with his Executive Order 2025-02 back last May in regard to enshrining certain protections, certain rights for people with autism. Now, getting to, I know we've touched on it a couple of times, and getting to the elephant in the room of sorts. And for those who aren't as well connected as the Congresswoman and myself, back on June the 18th, the US Department of Justice issued a memo in regard to the Olmstead decision of 1999 and also the community integration provisions of Section 504, stating that they were both optional and that they would no longer be enforcing them as written. In a last-minute decision, the previous questions we have were drawn up in May. And the Congresswoman knows in her just off-camera, very talented staffer, Ashley, and I have all been in conversation about the decision to include this next question was made during this past weekend. With the current events and recent DOJ memo regarding Olmstead in Section 504, is there a way we can, number one, counter it? And number two, what does it all mean for the average person?
Yeah. Well, let me start with your second question because,
Please.
So Congress writes the laws, the Supreme Court interprets them. And, we wrote in 1973 and 1990 these two critical pillars of civil rights protections for people with disabilities. And in 1999, the Supreme Court issued a decision that really reaffirmed what Congress was trying to do, which was to say that people with disabilities have got to be integrated into the community. They can't be separated. And we learn the lessons of what that looks like when we have an institutionalized first approach to governing, to self-government. I mean, it's the Laconia State School chapter of our state's history is one of the darkest of all time. So the Supreme Court reaffirmed what Congress said. It really held it up to say that there is a mandate to integrate people, to allow them to get home and community-based care, and to be a part of the community. And there's really no more American idea than that. Now, the Supreme Court got constitutional power. The Office of Legal Counsel, this memo you mentioned from the month of June of this year. One thing to say is, these are not judges. They are employees, bureaucrats within the Department of Justice who write memos that have no force of law. What they do is make clear how the Department of Justice is going to use its resources. So, the Department of Justice is not going to be enforcing the law in the way that I believe deeply Congress has said the law should be enforced. And that the practical impact on that for New Hampshire, for the town of Hudson, is that we're not going to see the kind of law enforcement that we have for the last 50 years. And that's a huge loss to this town, to our state, to our country, because that's why the Department of Justice was created. But the fact is, bureaucrats in the Department of Justice cannot change the laws that Congress has written. They cannot undo the decisions that the Supreme Court hands down. And that's a fact, and we should not lose sight of that, because
Exactly.
I know from my own experience that oftentimes bureaucrats within the Department of Justice think they have a lot more power than they actually do. So this is a memo that will make law enforcement less effective. And that's unfortunate, but that is fixable in the days ahead. I think it's really on us in Congress, and part of what my experience, I worked in the courts. There are very few people who think about how we can make our laws better based on court decisions. But I think every court decision, and frankly every OLC opinion, Office of Legal Counsel memo, gives us an opportunity to make the laws better and clearer, and that's exactly what we should do.
Sure.
And that's what we've done throughout our history on a bipartisan basis. So that's what I'm working to do in Congress on your behalf.
Indeed. And I mean, I know we couldn't have foreseen this, because again, quick fourth wall break, we were originally intending to do the segment back closer to Memorial Day this year, and where this came out in the time between Memorial Day and the time of this recording, it was something that I felt strongly enough that we should discuss.
And I'm glad you did, because we should all be focused on it. But what's one of the challenges of this moment, when I think about the tectonic shifts just in the last year, we've seen nearly $1 trillion in cuts to healthcare, which go directly to home and community-based care. It's putting the whole system in peril. It's raising everybody's healthcare costs.
Sure.
But these are the biggest cuts in American history, alongside a massive restructuring, and a disintegration of the Department of Education. So we talk about IDEA and Congress's obligation to fully fund. They're moving around who has authority and oversight over special education in this country, and that matters for every taxpayer in this town.
And I know we're a little bit on a schedule here, so I'll just mention it in brief, because I've talked about it previously. I know Nashua, just over the river from here, from where we sit today, and has been grappling with that very question about how do they organize their special education structure?
Right.
And how do they do it cost effectively, where they haven't been getting nearly as much funding, either from a federal sense or even from a state sense.
That's right.
That was certainly a hot button topic back in the spring.
And I think it will continue to be, because this is, a big piece of this. It's how we've chosen to fund education in the state, and as a state. But the part of it that I'm focused on is Congress has chronically failed to meet our own commitments when it comes to funding special education in this country. And we've got a bill called the IDEA Full Funding Act. I hear about it everywhere I go. I was in Pelham the other day, in Nashua the other day. This is a bill that would dramatically reduce property taxes in New Hampshire, because someone has to pay, and right now the entire burden is being felt by hardworking families, in part because Congress has not lived up to its obligations. So when I look at the world and the money that we're spending, and where it could go, to me, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah, and as I've mentioned a couple of times on the program previously, House Bill 1563 from this last legislative session readjusted the formula special education funding, or supportive education funding formula here in the state of New Hampshire. Do I believe it's going to fix it overnight? Probably not. And I said that at more length at the time. But I believe that that's what we've got to be doing too, and looking at ways to make small fixings, small adjustments to what we've been dealt.
Yeah.
And well, and looking at the big picture at the same time.
Amen.
Again, I know we're a little bit on a schedule, so just as we get into final thoughts here, and is there anything that you would want the audience to take away or remember about today's program? And of course, I'll yield to the Congresswoman first, and then I'll share my thoughts.
Well, I'm curious what you would say.
Well, normally I'd have something witty scripted here, but to be at part number 15 and have a seated member of Congress in the Hudson Community TV studio, I consider that to be an accomplishment number one. And I think what we've discussed today, even with it being an overview, is a very important conversation, a very important reminder of why we're doing this, each in our own respect, each within our own lane, and drawing attention to the fact that it's not just about the negativity, it's not just about the sound bites that we're hearing from the administration. Mm-hmm. There is reason for hope, there is reason for optimism, but it does not come without very dedicated, very hard work, and the Congresswoman's been an excellent example of time and time again. And it's still sinking in that I'm 15 shows into what was going to originally be a two-part segment about both the autism registry from last spring and then a little bit about our state legislature and just the privilege of literally the who's who that I've been able to have in studio with me over this journey so far. It's certainly been incredible to think about, and certainly I was reflecting on that on the way over today. And by far, this is, I'll say it if Mike and Matt won't, this has been the biggest accomplishment we've had so far for the show, and certainly the most notable guest we've had today.
Well, there's no place I'd rather be because what you said really resonates with me because I am optimistic about our country. I mean, we are facing massive challenges. People are feeling a whole lot of pain. There's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of corruption. And there's a lot of headwinds that go directly to the work that has taken us on an arc of progress for the last 50 years. But the thing that I remember, the Declaration of Independence calls the basic truth that all people are created equal. It's called a self-evident truth. But the fact is that even the most fundamental American ideas, the most self-evident truths, are ones that we've got to spend our lives working towards. And to me, what gives me hope is that at the end of the day, what is self-government all about? It's about people working together. Mm-hmm. It's about people, in the title of your show, Of His Own Words, it's about people speaking their own truths.
I can't take credit for the title. That's my co-producer, Alejandro, who gave it that title at the beginning of our very first show back in November, and I've kind of taken the idea and run with it.
It's beautiful, and you certainly have run with it, and I hope you continue to, because this is Hudson Community TV plays such an important role, and I'm grateful to you for bringing me to these studios because I've been wanting to come here for a long time.
For sure.
In this moment when there's so much noise, there's so much chaos, we got to get back to the basics of really.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Thinking through, what are we trying to accomplish together, and what is this thing we call self-government really all about? And to me, it's about, and what I love about my job is I get to advocate and to represent and to fight for you and for this town that I love so much, and the state I love so much. And we've got a lot of work to do. But the best ideas I get come directly from people speaking in their own words about their own lives and
definitely.
the challenges and opportunities they see. So,
And to that end, goodness knows that we've had that opportunity like 4 different times, 5 different times over the last year, and certainly it's a reminder of why I took this project on, why I've been doing this for 15 shows in not even a full year yet. It seems hard to believe it, that we're already talking that kind of number. I mean, I've got a whole list here of people that I can thank, but I'll keep it brief, I promise. All the way from my co-producer Alejandro Urrutia, who debuted with me on the first show, Dr. Louis Espeto, who's appeared on the show twice, State Representative Lily Foss, Hillsborough District 41 out of Manchester, State Representative Heath Howard of the Stratford County area, Kristen Evans from Able, New Hampshire, Shauna Hallberg, Lewis again, Sarah Georgians, the community organizer with Able, and then behind the scenes, Chris, who's on one of the cameras for Hudson Community TV, just off screen. Matt, again, on one of the cameras. Mike Johnson back in the production booth making us sound so awesome. Check us out on, of his own words, on Blue Sky, Facebook, Hudson Community TV website, Linktree, Substack, and YouTube. I believe I've hit
you got them all
upon
covered.
everything. Also, I'm looking forward to not just today's segment going on online, but we've also got our first on-location segment coming out soon, of which I had the privilege of going to the Disability Pride Festival in
Wonderful.
Concord a few weeks back.
Yeah.
So I'd like to thank Louis Espeto for that invitation. And we'll have not just today's show, but part 16 already coming up very soon. Plus we'll have a bonus segment with, weather permitting, we're going to have a bonus segment with the Special Olympics Heroes Cup out at Nashua.
And Home and
coming up
Stadium. That's
soon.
wonderful.
I'll be headed out that way on Friday. So again,
But
check
can
us
I
out.
ask you one more question?
Please.
Do you wear the New Hampshire tartan for every episode? Because I just love it.
I actually have not worn it for every episode, but I felt it was appropriate
It's
for
wonderful.
today. Again, certainly been an honor and a privilege to finally get this together,
Thank you.
Congresswoman. So sincerely, thank you.
Thank you, Ian.
And those at home, thank you for watching.